Well, good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those of you out west. My name is Rob Schuster, and I'll be hosting your webinar today. Our topic is nonviolent confrontation management. This is a topic that could be appropriate for a number of different people in a number of different industries. Comes to mind to me is customer service, retail, anybody dealing with consumers, social services, healthcare, hospitality industry, any public service industry, virtually anybody that has an interaction with potentially hostile people. And that's pretty much what we're going to define the scope. So by that introduction, you'll know that it's going to be a fairly generic presentation, but one that I think you will be able to glean some information that could be useful in your own particular environments. Let's begin with an overview of the program. I'll start with just outlining our primary objectives. We have about an hour, so we're not going to be able to accomplish a definitive know-all, end-all set of information, but it's going to give you some usable, practical information that you can apply relatively quickly and perhaps with only some modification in your particular work environments. We're going to talk about underlying factors. All too often in these incidents of hostility, and you may have experienced it already yourself, you find that the activity is somewhat disproportional to the situation at hand. This person seems to be overreacting tremendously. Often there are underlying factors at play. We'll talk about the role that fear and anxiety plays in your ability to deal with these people. We will give you verbal and nonverbal de-escalation techniques. And then finally we'll work through the confrontation or the progression of this confrontation. Some of them are very rapid and some of them go through various stages somewhat slowly and progressively. Talk about the responses and the intervention for each of those stages. And finally, we'll talk about if the person is remaining in your environment, in other words, they may be an employee, that you're going to have to keep them in the environment unless the situation is so grave that it's a termination. But there's a recovery phase that everyone needs to go through to kind of repair relationships, if you will. So let's start with the underlying factors. As I said before, often there are causes of escalating behavior that you're faced with that's way beyond what you feel is appropriate for what this person, for the situation. This person seems to be very much overreacting. The behavior is disproportional to the problem at hand as they're describing it. What you need to understand, and it's really the basis for being able to control yourself, is that these behaviors often are affected by factors that you have no control over and may in fact be very unrelated to the situation that they're describing. Now you may not be able to affect these underlying factors, but understanding them will allow you to control your own response to this acting out and avoid becoming a problem, part of the problem yourself, avoid escalating it. It's important then it allows you to depersonalize the situation. And that is a trap that many of us fall into when given these situations. You have to depersonalize them. You have to recognize that this isn't directed at you personally. It's a situational complaint most often, and that you're not the cause of the problem or the negative behavior. This can allow you to help control your emotions and not become part of the problem. It's really important to listen for these real reasons, because sometimes the reasons that are stated can give you a clue as to what a more creative solution might be. And that's very useful. It may be something very different than what they're asking for, but in fact better than what they're asking for all parties involved. So let's take a look at some of these underlying possible external or internal causes of this acting out behavior that you're now faced with. It could be displaced or redirected anger from another totally unrelated situation. And you're probably going to be able to pick on that up on that fairly easily, but it just doesn't seem like they should be reacting as angrily as they are. Maybe they've experienced the loss of personal power through some incident that they've gone through in their life, and they need to prove to themselves, and in this instance to you, that they're still in control and they can still act as an individual. So later on when we get into the verbal and nonverbal, there'll be phrases that we'll talk about, but anything that you can develop as a solution for them that they are in control of, so that you can say to them, you are in control of this solution, of this remedy. It might be what they want to hear if this is an underlying cause. Sometimes they just need to be heard. It's an attention-seeking endeavor. A lot of people that once you hear them out, and once you display that, and here again in your responses, you can use the phrase, or you can use some variation of the phrase that you want to understand their position. Someone who's got a real need to get attention or to be heard, they want to hear that you care and want to understand their position, because that's kind of the seed that will help you get to an effective response and perhaps calm them down a bit. Well, sometimes if the confrontation starts rather verbally or in a public place or in front of someone that they're there with, they have a hard time backing away from it if during that confrontation, as it progresses, they realize they're wrong and their behavior is disproportional to the situation at hand. And you are trying to help them, but they've made these statements. Sometimes it's an or else statement that they've made, and frankly, they need to save face. It's pride driven. It could be somebody with a low self-esteem and they want to accomplish something. They want to have a sense of, well, I won. So saving face is something that could be an underlying factor. And later on, we'll talk about relocating this incident, if you will, to a setting that takes away their audience and is more conducive to a more controlled conversation. So that can be effective if that, in fact, is the underlying factor. Not being able to complete a task or falling short of a goal because what they're asking for isn't being done, and they're embarrassed of failure. So anything that you could do in your discussion towards resolution that you can communicate the concept of, you will not take the blame for this, reassuring them that whatever happens, they are not going to take the blame for this, that they will not be found at fault. It could help to ease their aggravation if that's what's driving their mood. Confusion, just flat out not understanding, being confused about what is happening, or a fear that the result is going to be unpleasant for them. And finally, psychological or physiological causes that might be drug-induced behavior, just hunger, pain, insomnia, or some clinical disorder could be driving this, and those may be fairly evident as well early on in the progression of the confrontation. You need to understand these, and if you do, it will play a role. It will help you to better detach from the situation, to come up with objective solutions, and not frankly be sucked into the emotion or the tension of the situation itself. This is an important step. Another thing that can affect your ability to deal with these situations is just plain old fear and anxiety. And I'm talking about yours. Fear is quite common in a confrontation. Not all of us go through life as fighters. Not all of us go through life thriving on confrontation. Most people don't like it. Most people try to avoid it. And most people feel this fear. Don't think that you're inferior if you don't. Even those, and I should have introduced this whole program by stating my background as a police officer, and in the last 25 or so years doing executive protection and workplace violence related work and consulting. What I've found is those that are very calm in the face of great tension and panic on the part of others, they're usually just as afraid as everyone else. They just disguise it better. They deal with the moment better. They detach better. They work through the problem, and it's afterwards that they really feel the emotional baggage that comes along with these situations. So don't think that because you might be fearful of someone in a confrontation that makes you inferior. It's quite natural. Now, we cannot completely eliminate our fear. However, if you learn to understand it, learn to detach and control that fear, you can use it in a positive way. Knowing that you have alternatives. Later on in the presentation, we're going to talk about tools and alternatives that will boost your confidence and will help you control this fear. There are some very unproductive effects of this fear and anxiety that can really inhibit your ability to de-escalate the situation and to come up with a peaceful and acceptable for all parties resolution. You can just freeze. I mean, I've seen too many situations where the person faced with the confrontation, they just let their emotions get the best of them and they can't think straight. They aren't listening, which, as you'll learn, is a very important tactic, but they just freeze. There's an inability to function in this situation. So that's an unproductive effect, obviously. It can cause you to overreact. Even if you understand the situation and the person seems to be, their behavior seems to be overly aggressive for the situation, you perceive that the situation is then worse when it really isn't. And that can drive you to saying things that either are not pertinent to the situation, maybe making the situation personal, or even using offensive or inappropriate language when that language is being thrown at you. You have to be very disciplined not to go down that same path yourself. And frankly, some are so sucked in by the emotion of the situation as it causes them to strike out at someone, not being able to control your own actions. That can be a disaster as well. Now, I will tell you, I'm a man, and I will be the first to admit that this last thing that I haven't read is very important, and it's more of a problem for men than it is women. Being sucked in by your own anger, your own ego, your own pride, your own sense that I am not going to let this person talk to me this way. I'm not going to let this person deal with me this way. I'm not going to take it. It's not about you. It's about coming up with a peaceful resolution to this situation and de-escalating it for both of you and everyone else around. And it is hard for men to come to that realization. We all want to kind of puff our chests out and meet challenge with challenge. That's the wrong thing to do. Nobody's going to win in that situation. It's not going to get better. And it certainly will not allow you to come to a more peaceful resolution. Now, ways to control this fear and anxiety. First of all, I've already made the point, you have to understand the situation for what it is. You also, and we will talk about these in later slides now, learn techniques to protect yourself. The safer you feel during this situation, the calmer you'll be able to be. And you can have a feeling of safety just by positioning, being in the right environment. You'll see later on down there, the next bullet, having a notification system. I have it in red because it is essential. You need to have someone that you know you can summon, and summon quickly if things get out of hand. This will help you control your fear. Early warning opportunity if possible. What I mean by that is, and now that's different than the notification system. The early warning opportunity is whether it's a reception area, a lobby, a waiting room, an administrative office. Whoever sees the person first and realizes, even if they're not the one to deal with this person, that this is an aggravated individual, and whoever deals with them is kind of going to have their hands full. When you're that person that has to deal with that aggressor, it would be nice to know that going into the situation. So anything you can develop within your organization that allows for this early warning opportunity is to your advantage. It will help you go into the situation calmer and mentally prepared. So in addition to that early warning system, which is before the confrontation, excuse me, during the confrontation, you need that notification system so that you know you have an alternative to summon help. Now, that can be anything that your environment, that your situation, that your facility will allow. It should be discreet, but easily understood and easy to implement. It can be a silent alarm, a silent push button at a desk. It could be a code word that during your conversation, if there's others around, other employees that will hear this, they know that you have a bit of a problem on your hands. It can be a signal, a simple signal to someone. It can be a flat-out radio call with a particular code on the radio that the person thinks you're summoning assistance for them, and what you're really doing is summoning assistance for yourself. It could be a phone call. Some way of notifying someone else, because if you know you have a team approach and you don't have to respond alone, first of all, if you get the early warning sign, don't respond alone if it can be avoided. But even if you have to respond alone, have that way of getting someone to help you, even if it's just one other team member, one other employee, because there is strength in numbers, even if it's just two. This is important to control your own fear and anxiety. So now that you've understood the problem, there could be driving forces that aren't obvious, and that you controlling your own fear, now you're at least in a position to implement some of the tools that we'll talk about now. Those would be let's start with the nonverbal de-escalation techniques. One of the first things that, and I'll tell you, I learned this as a policeman in responding to bar fights. One of the first tactics we would use is to separate the combatants first, and then take them away from the environment that they were in. Take them away from their audience. Now, your ability to do this, I realize, varies depending on your situation. You may have limited resources, but try to develop another area beyond where you're going to initially meet them so that you can take them. You can call it whatever you want, but inviting them to another area so that you can have a private conversation, so it can be calm, so it sounds like they're being taken to a VIP area where you can, and I'll jump down to the last bullet because it's a powerful one. You can just sit down. It is much more difficult to stay aggressive and argumentative and be in somebody's face if you're sitting down. It's just that has some calming effect in and of itself. So offering to change locations for a more private area. In the example that I gave about separating the combatants and taking them away from their audience, if they really want to back down and become more calm, and they realize they've made a mistake with you, and perhaps their behavior is beyond what the situation calls for, now they have to have a way to save face. And if you don't give them that way to save face, they may not de-escalate just to do so. So it allows them that face-saving opportunity. It also places you in a more controllable environment, one that you kind of predetermined. It buys you a little think time. While you're relocating, you can be thinking about, okay, what's really driving this person? What do they really want? What are they really asking for? What options do I have available as resolutions for them? And then when you get back, you can sit down, offer them refreshments. This is a very powerful tactic to at least give an initial calming effect. This change of location and just offering to sit down. The most important thing, I think, and it's for your own personal safety, is personal space management. The positioning of spacing and buffers, if you will, between you and this. You have to think of them now as a potential combatant if they're still agitated. Most of us have a personal space bubble, and we all understand that's about 2 to 3.5 feet. For an agitated aggressor, I would suggest more. 4 or 5 feet might be a little bit more appropriate. And I point this out because you have to be careful not to violate this person's space. Give them a little space, not just for your safety, but if you violate their personal space in a challenging manner to quiet them down, this could only make things worse because it may increase their anxiety and inflame the incident. So understand that personal space management and maintain that distance for courtesy as well as safety. Positioning, I would suggest that whatever space you're in, whether it's a room, an office, a conference room, a reception area, make sure that both parties have a way of escaping, especially you. You need to position in a way that neither party feels trapped in, especially you. If this aggressor becomes violent, you need to be able to get out and get out quickly and unobstructed. So this becomes a function of furniture placement. Perhaps, ideally, you have a barrier, some type of physical barrier or buffer in addition to space that's between you and this person. If you're standing, and if you haven't been able to have them sit down, if you're standing and you're facing them, again, it's a safety position. We, as policemen, used to call it the interview stance, but you put your body in what's called a bladed position. And you can't see me, so it's kind of hard to describe, but you're not facing them face on, but you turn your body at about a 45-degree angle. So you're still looking at them. You still keep eye contact and you're still facing them, but your body is turned a bit to the side. It takes away opportunities to quickly hurt you in various ways. Your weight should be evenly distributed on both of your feet. You don't get into a defensive crouch. That's not what I'm describing. I'm just saying put your body in a way that your hands are above your waist. A lot of people talk with their hands. I do. My hands are waving right now. But put your hands in a position where you're either holding them, with open palms in a kind of a peaceful way. You're not clenched fisted. I'll talk about that later in terms of body language. But your hands are above your waist so that if there's a lunge at you, you have a way of protecting yourself. So the body bladed position, your weight evenly distributed, and your hands are just above you can either, play with a ring or hold one palm in another. It's not threatening, but it is at least put your hands in a position that you could defend yourself more quickly. And it's very critical to maintain that avenue of retreat if it becomes uncontrollable. So remember, so far, we've talked about the notification process, and we've talked about maintaining your own personal safety. These will build your confidence before you say word one. Before you start really exchanging thoughts with this person, you're going to be a little more confident because you know the help is available and you can get out and protect yourself if you have to. Look at these photographs. Clearly, the two gentlemen on the left, they are not, and it's hard to say who's the aggressor in this situation. Neither one of them are demonstrating good body position because they're far too close. Even though their hands are up, they're not in a kind of a defensive posture, and they're too close. The people on the right side, even though they're sitting, the fact that they're sitting tells me that Maybe she has already been able to calm him down a bit, but still maintain a little bit more of a distance buffer. If I was reading the body language of that gentleman on the right, his fists aren't clenched, his jaws not, his teeth aren't clenched. It seems as though he's calmed down a bit, but that's still a little too close. So keep the space. Now let's talk about body posture and motion. Some other nonverbal, and some of these are subtle, and some of them are not so subtle. Any approach or position that appears that you're trying to challenge, even if you're being challenged, but if it appears that you're trying to challenge back, may increase their anxiety, and it's going to at least delay or eliminate your opportunity to de-escalate this behavior. It may make it worse. So try not to be challenging. Try to be, at the same time you're defensive, try to be accepting. Facial expressions. Here again, some obvious ones. Rolled eyes are never a positive piece of feedback for someone. Raised eyebrows, that's a gesture of questioning. And if they're trying to state a position, unless you're totally surprised, raised eyebrows can be interpreted as doubt. An untimely smile, even if they're describing something very grave or something bad that's happened to them. Sometimes you get a nervous smile, and that can be misinterpreted. You have to be aware of these facial expressions and try to control them, make them appropriate to the situation. Hand gestures, I already mentioned, a clenched fist is absolutely a sign of danger. You need to notice that. You need to be in control of yourself enough to see the person's hands, and if they have clenched fists, you need to interpret that as a signal of danger, because that is, they are getting ready to do something. They're at least demonstrating anger. They're ready to hit something or someone. Pointing, just pointing. We've all been told it's not polite to point. Everybody understands that. So if you're getting pointed at, don't do it in reverse, because that won't make things any better. As you can see in the photograph there, crossed arms. Crossed arms are usually not a very accepting body position. It's either defensive, or it can even be interpreted as somewhat challenging. So that might be a posture to maybe avoid. These little subtle body language gestures and expressions and positions, they can mean a lot to a person that is trying to evaluate whether you're truly trying to help them or not. And some of them can be very subtle. Let me give you an example from my youth that my father used to do this. He wore glasses. He wore reading glasses, just as I do now. And I understand how this happened now, because I wear reading glasses and have done this. But he used to look. He'd be wearing his glasses, and he'd be talking to me about something. And if it was somewhat confrontive, I was trying to explain my position, and he would kind of peer over the top of his glasses at me. Well, to me, as a teenager, that meant he doubted me. He was looking over his glasses as if to say, hey, I'm not buying this. Well, really, he was just looking over his reading glasses to look at me. But I read it differently. So sometimes these subtle things, you don't realize you may be sending a message that can be inhibiting progress in your conversation. Now that I wear reading glasses, I totally understand his position, and that's not what he meant, but it's just something I thought I'd share with you. Be prepared to react defensively, but not in a challenging manner. This, as I said, helps your self-confidence. We used to call it in a police department, have a controlled presence. A presence is the way you control your voice, your tone. It portrays confidence. It shows this person that you're not easily shaken. I wish I could give you A through Z the steps to have this controlled presence, but unfortunately, it is a function of experience. The more often you deal with people, the better you are at reading them and understanding what can get them to a positive, peaceful resolution. And it is confidence. It comes with experience. So if you're young, watch others that do it and see how they do it. See what phrases they use. See how they put people at ease. See how they portray that confidence. Sometimes it's a fake, but the better you can fake confidence, the more confident you're going to appear, and that will come across. So having that controlled presence is quite powerful. Now let's talk about the what we say and how we say it, the verbal de-escalation techniques. They're equally important. The first thing you need to do is the volume's probably going to be up because this person may be talking fast, talking loudly, or even shouting. So you need to be cognizant of that and keep your volume that is appropriate for the distance and the environment. You usually have to deliver your message at a very even, rhythmic rate, slowed down, and keep your voice as calm and low as you can. If you're more calm in your speech pattern, if you slow down your conversation and suggest positive alternatives, it's going to have an effect on them eventually. Just inflections of your voice. Remember, how we say it is as important as what we say. Because the next slide, you'll see there's no magic words to either use or to avoid. But you want to avoid certain inflections of impatience or condescension or inattention or indifference. And I'll give you an example. Just a two-word phrase. And I'll say it 3 different ways, if I can do it right. And you'll see that it's subject to 3 different interpretations. The 2 words are, oh, really. If I say, oh, really? Or if I say, oh, really? Or if I say, oh, really? That can have 3 different meanings. It can be one of understanding. It can be one of doubt. Or I could be truly surprised and want to learn more. How you say it and the tone you say it with can mean a lot with those 2 simple words. That's just an example. Maybe it's not a good example, but you can see how tone can very much change how you're being perceived. Don't make false promises. If you want to say, well, I'll get my supervisor, make sure your supervisor is available, because if you say, I'll get my supervisor, and you come back without your supervisor, you've lost credibility and you have made a false promise. Don't do that, because they won't believe the next thing you say you're going to do for them. And it's early in the process where you need to start. We'll get into the progression of this confrontation later, but you need to set behavior limits. There's only certain things you'll tolerate. So let's talk about those limits. I need to tell you, though, that these limits will vary for everyone. Some people will tolerate more yelling. Some people will tolerate being cursed at and it doesn't bother them. Physically aggressive gestures, being pointed at or something like that, some people will tolerate more of that than others. It's your personal decision, and your decision has to be based on what you're willing to accept and what is acceptable for the environment in which you're having this conversation. So, but make sure that you state the limits that you're going to tolerate to them pretty clearly, without challenging, but make sure that they understand that more positive results can come out of being a little calmer. That sentence on the bottom, that is one of my favorite techniques. Things are getting out of hand by saying, I can help you more if we aren't yelling at each other. It conveys you are trying to help them. And by saying we aren't yelling at each other, it's pretty obvious to this person you're not yelling at them. So it's a way of asking them to stop yelling at you so that you can help them more. This is a phrase that kind of gives them a directive. Hey, stop yelling at me, without making it a directive. And it shows them you're trying to help. So phrases like that and the way they're delivered can be very powerful and can get someone to realize, oh, okay, maybe this person is trying to help me. Hand gestures, just in that photograph, Clearly the hands, both palms facing upward, I mean, that connotates confusion, or that this person has nothing to offer. That may not be a hand gesture that you want to use. Or is the finger pointing, an angry gesture. There really are no magic words in terms of verbal de-escalation techniques. There are no magic words that will guarantee that this person is not going to act out. The more calm you are and controlled in your communication, the better off you have, the better chance you have of diffusing this situation. But there is nothing at all more powerful than just listening. Remember some of those underlying factors? One of them was they just want to be heard. Well, sometimes not saying much and just listening can be extremely valuable and have a de-escalation effect just by itself. By actively listening, you demonstrate your commitment. You care about the situation. You care about this person as an individual. It's one of the best ways to calm them down and start to build trust. Just shut up and listen. Hear them out, allowing them within limits to state their case. Pay full attention. Don't be judgmental from the very beginning based on their looks, based on their initial frustration and belligerent attitude. Pay some attention, relocate, hear them out, reflect before you respond right away. You can use restatement, putting what they're asking you for into your own words so that you can make sure that you're clear and show some empathy. The one thing I would suggest is, even though there's no magic words to use, you want to avoid certain ones that are confusing terms, jargon, professional jargon to those that are not in your industry can be very confusing and can make them think that you're trying to confuse them and make matters worse. You want to keep the message in the spirit of, I want to help you. Allow me to help you. I'm trying to listen. I can't listen very well if you're just yelling at me. I want to help you. Let's work together to do this. So, in summarizing the verbal and the nonverbal de-escalation tactics, you do want to isolate the situation. Isolate it both conceptually, like, okay, is there something underlying that's driving this person? And then physically isolate it with that relocation. That's very important. Get them to sit is a powerful tool. Remain calm and listen. Be aware of your own nonverbal feedback you're giving them, and be attentive to the nonverbal feedback they're giving you, the clenched fists, the pointing. These can be indications that either you're making success or you're not, and things are getting worse. Try to maintain your own control, and by listening for those underlying factors, you may come up with some little more creative solutions. Keep your objective as being helpful within limits. What you want to avoid is the overreaction, the threatening, the challenge, the taking it personally and getting up in their face and demonstrating to them that you're not going to let them get away with that, treating you this way. Don't get in a power struggle. It's not about you. It's about them and getting this thing de-escalated and getting a good resolution so that everyone's happy. Lack of it, that may not be possible, but try to get to a safe resolution anyway. You can't convey a lack of attention. One of the worst things you could do would be to take cell phone calls during this confrontation. That is not going to get you anywhere, or even peering at emails, because that absolutely communicates to someone that they're number two. That person on the phone is more important to you, and that's not going to get you much success at all. Don't make the false promises, and don't use jargon. So those are kind of the verbal and nonverbal techniques to de-escalate a situation. So when do you apply them? Let's talk about the confrontation progression. Now, I need to say that this confrontation doesn't always progress through all three stages. Sometimes it goes from one to the last stage. or 1 to the very aggressive stage that you'll see. Sometimes it is slow to progress, and it depends on how you handle it at each intervention stage, whether they go to the next stage. But typically they go through some stages, albeit varying rates of speed. The behavior in the first stage, which I call the yellow stage, you can tell this person's aggravated. There's some anxiety here. They're questioning your authority, or they're questioning why something is happening or not happening to them. They're information seeking. They seek a rational, they have a rational question, and they're seeking a rational response, some help. They may even be questioning authority. Who gave you the right to do this? They may be attempting to lure you into a power struggle early. They may even be evasive in articulating what their real problem is. These are the indications that you're going to have a potential confrontation. So at that stage, you have to implement, with an understanding approach, try to change that location. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your position. Let's go back and sit down, and maybe we can come up with some resolution. Getting them to sit down has a calming effect. Maybe you even offer a refreshment. This is buying you time, and it has some calming effect, can work to your advantage. You want to restate and what they're saying in terms that make sure they know that you understand their position and that you understand perhaps what they're asking for. Offer any rational response that you can. Ignore any challenge, just redirect it back to the topic. If you can tell all they're there to do is to challenge you, just keep redirecting it back to the problem and the peaceful resolution. And this is where you start to set your limits. If that individual persists or escalates, even though you've thrown out some totally rational resolutions and solutions to the problem, if they just keep wanting to elevate it, start to set your limits now. The next stage is kind of stage orange. It's a little more aggressive. There's a noticeable escalation or change in the behavior, in their attitude, their demeanor, or their speech. They could be more defensive. There's some perhaps loss of rational thought and speech pattern. They become a little more combative with their words anyway. They challenge your authority to fix this. There could be a refusal to listen to anything that you suggest, and they're getting to a point of absolute non-compliance. It's important to, at this point, when you respond, to take control of that situation. This response to a stage 2 is they're testing you. You need to take control of the developing situation. Verbalizing your objective is to help them and to avoid arguing. Remember that phrase, I can help you more if we don't yell at each other. Relate the behavior to the positive effects, the positive alternatives that it can create for both of you. And point out the negative consequences. I can't help you if you continue this behavior. And now it becomes extremely important at this stage, before it gets too far out of hand, before it gets overly aggressive, engage that notification process. You've already tried to relocate them. That's the one tool. Get them to sit down. You've listened to them carefully. Now engage that notification process, because the time between stage 2 and stage 3, which is the next one, can be very quick, and it can be very dangerous. So engage that notification process, whatever your procedures are, so you know you have help on its way, and it will build your confidence and your ability to stay in control. So that third stage is it can be very verbal, or it can get aggressive. Let's look at it from both perspectives. There could be a lot of shouting, some emotional outbursts. They kind of blow off steam. They're screaming, they're cursing. And I'll say this with some precaution, some of this might be good. Allowing them in the right environment, if you've relocated them to a more private area, letting them blow off a little steam. They're not hurting you at that point. And if you're confident enough, they're not hurting you at all. Let them blow off a little steam. It might help. They might come to a realization, whoa, I'm way out of line here. They won't say that, but you might see them come to that realization if they blurt out certain things. Allow that to happen to a point. And I can't tell you what that point is. It's going to vary. You will probably have an instinctual reaction. You'll know. Aggressive body language. You can see this gentleman in the picture. He's at stage 3. If your confrontation starts that way, it's not stage 1. It's stage 3. You have finger pointing. You have angry face. You have absolute tension, a loss of control, some physical displays. They may even try to get closer to you to invade your personal space, to try to intimidate you. There may even be an implied or a direct threat to your physical well-being, and that's the point at which it goes a different direction. Any physical signs that are at least implied or a direct threat, well, let's look at it. If it's only verbal, your response to things that are just verbal, they're just blowing off steam, they haven't been too aggressive directly towards you, there's no physical threat, there's no verbalized threat, they're just really angry and agitated. Remember, get that notification system in process. If you've already, hopefully you've already redirected them away from their audience. If you didn't remember to do that earlier, it's essential that you do it now. You really have to get them away from onlookers who may be feeding the problem. Indicate to them very clearly that they're violating your limits, and you're not allowing they are not allowing you to help them. And maintain that protective body position that we talked about until the subject regains some control. Now that's if it's only verbal. And if it's gotten to the point where they're physical, where the action escalates to some form of intimidation or physical assault, whether it's a verbal threat or a nonverbal one, keep your ego in check. And guys, I'm telling you, this is harder for us to do than it is for women. Keep your ego in check. You're not going to gain anything by fighting them. A physical confrontation doesn't work for anyone. It's probably just going to cost you your job. This is more likely to jeopardize your safety and perhaps this individual's safety. So just back off. Protect yourself, because any physical action at this point can be very quick. These stages can progress rapidly, and a resort to physical action, that can happen pretty suddenly. So you need to maintain those protective body postures and positioning. And at some point in time, it's just not going to work. You need to disengage. You need to wait for assistance or get out of there. Remember to always have that escape path. We talked about that earlier. And if it's gotten to this point, now's the time to use it. Don't be afraid just to break contact and leave, because you may have to do so. Now at this point, you've got a few outcomes. And based on these outcomes, if it's the last one, there's going to be another stage. The outcome could be that the situation ends because the subject leaves. They're still angry, but they give up and just leave. Well, for you, the situation has ended for the time being. Obviously, there are other concerns, but that's another subject. Now, the situation could continue to escalate until there's a break of contact. You've decided, I can't do anything more with this person. They're a danger to me. I break contact, and either security or the police become necessary. And the situation ends because of that. Either way, the situation is ended. There's no other stage. It could be that you've been successful engaging in some of these tactics, verbal and non-verbally. They get an acceptable resolution, they calm down, and they leave. Situation's over. However, if the situation subsides on its own because you've been somewhat successful with these tactics, but they don't leave, there's been no resolution, they come to a realization that perhaps they're acting a little out of what's reasonable, out of the ordinary, or out of character, and they calm down on their own. The situation is still unresolved. You still have more problem solving to do, but you're going to do it in a much more calm manner. Now you have another stage of this confrontation. It's not as much confrontational anymore, but it's still a stage, and that is the calming stage. Remember, you haven't come up with a resolution, therefore they haven't left yet. But there's some tension reduction, a lot of it. There's a decline in their emotional and physical energy. Once that energy has been released and they vented, they have a little calmer tone. They may even be apologetic. And now together you're considering proposed solutions, or you're trying to work together to develop one. You're not out of this situation yet. You're in a calm stage. So the response to this is you need to display a calm, somewhat reassuring approach. You've let them vent. Things have calmed down. You want to reestablish rapport with your own calm demeanor. Your communication is under control. You haven't been sucked into the emotion of the event. And the subject is now displaying reduced anger, perhaps even guilty about it. They may be apologizing. You allow them to reestablish control themselves, and you work together on a resolution. Excuse me. Be very careful, however, not to reignite it. And a good way to reignite it would be to comment on the behavior that just ensued. It's not the time to reflect on their bad behavior at this point, because he could just reignite the situation. So don't address it. They've already realized they were wrong. They're calming down. They're feeling guilty anyway. Just come to that peaceful resolution together. Now, we've got about 8 minutes left. I only have 2 or 3 more slides. This may be the very end. You come to a solution, and that's it. The person leaves happy, and the situation is over. But let's just say this was an employee with whom you're having this confrontation. And they aren't going to leave your environment. They're going to stay there. They're going to come back to work the next day or be there the rest of the day. If it hasn't gotten to a point where this is an offense that's calls for termination, they have to be kind of integrated back into the workforce, socially and professionally. After a physical or emotional crisis, this energy level will drop. It's a difficult stage for that individual. They know they've done wrong. Perhaps they're even thinking in the back of their mind that their job's in jeopardy. There's thoughts of shame, guilt, job loss. This may weigh heavily on them. You may have at this point in time some need to communicate with other staff, perhaps if law enforcement's called, bystanders, witnesses. But before you address it with the person, make sure that individual is back under control so that they can discuss it rationally. And when you reestablish communication, do it with a kind of a reparative approach. We solved the problem, but let's repair our relationship. Be sure that everybody is calm. Everybody is calm, because there may be other staff members that are fired up because of the way this person acted. So make sure that they are under control before discussing the incident at all. You want to review the basic facts, because certain team members may have seen things that you didn't. They may have seen it from a different perspective or know something about this person that you didn't at the time. So listen to their perspectives as well as those of the person who acted out, of course, after they're calm. Review with the staff, finally, how well they did at that notification system. How well the system worked. Did it get you help? Did it allow you to be more confident in coming to a resolution? Was there any danger that wasn't resolved by having assistance come? So evaluate that notification system, because it's essential. And finally, you may have to determine whether discipline or dismissal is necessary. So that's pretty much all I had to offer in terms of the presentation. You can see my information there on the screen. I will tell you that if you would like to get a copy of the slides, I see that's one of the questions already. If you'd like to see a copy of the slides, send me an email at that email you see on the screen, and I will send them to you. So I have a few questions here. Are we getting the handout before the presentation so we can follow along? Well, unfortunately, that's already been addressed. We didn't give handouts ahead of time, but if you email me with your request, I will send you the slide copies. Does AFIMAC offer nonviolent crisis intervention training for staff in Ontario? Yes, we do offer this in Canada as well as the US. Call me at the number you see on the screen. Actually, my direct line number is 440-878-5114. And I not only teach this class, but I teach a good number of our workplace violence classes, from bullying to high-risk terminations, to general workplace violence preparedness. Just call me and we'll come up with a solution for you, whatever your situation is. But yes, we do offer this course. Okay, excuse me. Another question just came in. Do we have a recommendation about the place to use inside of a room? I'm a security person. Where do I have to sit? Near the door. Well, we did talk throughout the presentation about allowing for both parties of the discussion to have an evacuation route, to not feel like they're trapped in. That's probably inherent to you as a security person, to not feel trapped in and not position yourself that way. But it's not to those that are not in security or public safety. So both parties to this confrontational situation should feel like they could leave at any time. They're not trapped in. So that's the best answer I can give you. Both positions so they can get to the door quickly. Are there any other questions? Okay, well, I thank you for your participation. And as I said, if you email me, I'll send you a copy of the slides. Have a good day.